Welcome to Shadows at Dusk. Dusk is not the end. It's the doorway between two worlds. A place where stories slip through, quiet, cold, and true. You've entered that space now, and what follows is meant for you. Stay in the shadow. The phone shrilled into the quiet of a Monday afternoon, dragging Elias from his reverie. On the line, a voice taut with nerves, a Mr. Kalen, spoke of an artifact salvaged from some forgotten dig site, a curious effigy needing restoration. Kalen insisted Elias, and only Elias, undertake the task. He mentioned peculiar inscriptions, a low thrumming palpable beneath the fingertips. Elias nearly scoffed, the usual eccentricities of collectors, yet the lean times gnawed, he acquiesced. That very evening, under a bruised twilight sky, Kalen arrived, the object shrouded within a crate of weathered timber. Once the man departed, leaving behind an echo of anxiety, Elias pried open the box. Before him stood a thing of obsidian hue, perhaps 3 feet in stature, its surface coarse beneath the studio lights. The form hinted at humanity, an archaic idol warped by some alien aesthetic. Its cranium swelled disproportionately above folded arms. Fine fissures webbed the chest. Where eyes should have been, only vacant sockets stared. Yet Elias felt a prickling awareness, the unnerving sense of being observed by an animate stone. Dawn found Elias positioning the effigy centrally in his workshop, bathed in the glare of focused lamps. His tools, chisels fine and broad, brushes of varying bristle, vials of solvent, binding agents, lay arrayed like surgical instruments. His objective: assess its structural heart, mend the fractures, refine the coarse exterior. The moment his palms met the statue's torso, a tremor answered, subtle as a moth's wing against glass, a phantom pulse. Leaning close, ear pressed to the cold rock, yielded only silence. He touched it again. The vibration ceased, stone, cool and inert. Yet sweat beaded on his brow, wiped away with a dusty hand. Imagination, surely. He forced the thought down, resuming his task. The day bled away in the meticulous removal of ancient grime. A fine brush coaxed dirt from delicate ridges. The air grew thick with the scent of deep earth, a musty counterpoint clinging stubbornly to his gloves. Shadows stretched, and with them grew the sensation of unseen company. Nerves, he muttered, glancing over his shoulder repeatedly. By the time dusk painted the high windows violet, a layer of incrustation had fallen away, sharpening the statue's features. The face, though smooth, bore a chipped wound where a mouth might be. Intricate patterns, spirals and lines, emerged etched into the arms. Around 10, exhaustion claimed him. He extinguished the main lights, leaving only a single bulb suspended above the figure, a lone sentinel in the gloom. Locking the workshop, he climbed the stairs to his apartment above. At the landing, a sound brushed his ear, a whisper, indecipherable, fleeting. He froze, straining to hear. Silence returned. Peering down through the railing's gap, he saw the statue, immobile in its pool of light. Just fatigue playing tricks on his hearing. He retreated to bed. Sleep proved elusive. In the deep quiet around 2, a distinct scrape echoed from below. Elias bolted upright, heart hammering against his ribs. Flashlight clutched tight, he crept down the stairs, the concrete floor chilling his bare feet. The workshop lay steeped in shadow, moonlight striping the dust motes. He navigated towards the central figure. It wasn't quite right. The arms, still folded, rested at a subtly different angle. He circled it, memory struggling to recapture its precise posture from hours before. Tentatively, he laid his hands upon it. The stone felt warmer than it should, though the vibration was absent now. He stepped back, uncertainty churning within him. Perhaps he was mistaken, overwrought. Yet as he turned towards the stairs, a conviction settled deep in his gut. Something within that stone effigy was stirring. Morning light brought a forced resolve. Focus on the craft, Elias commanded himself. Ignore the phantoms. His attention turned to the fissures marring the arms and torso. Yet as he applied a stabilizing solution, the stone beneath his brush felt unexpectedly fragile. The existing cracks didn't just accept the binder, they widened, spiderwebbing outwards, tracing patterns that resembled glyphs from no lexicon he knew. He blinked, checked the pressure of his hand minimal. The fissures spread as if reacting, drinking the solution and etching themselves deeper. He halted, a cold knot tightening in his stomach, and simply watched the statue under the stark lights. The workshop air hung heavy, thick with the tang of chemicals and pulverized stone. He threw open a window, gulping outside air, before turning back to the silent enigma. He pushed himself onward, employing a fine-tipped pick to clear the loose debris. As the tool kissed the torso, the vibration returned, a brief 2-second thrum, then vanished. His scalp prickled, his breath hitched. An echo through the tool, he rationalized, though he'd barely applied force. Later, drawn inexplicably to the statue's face, he noticed the chipped mouth seemed altered. A slight downward curve tugged at one corner, a nascent grimace. His pulse quickened. Logic warred with observation. Stone doesn't shift expression. He hadn't carved or broken it, merely cleaned. Yet the lips were different. Fumbling for his phone, he found a reference photo taken before the work began. Zooming in, the mouth was flat, damaged but expressionless. Now that undeniable sneer. A hand flew to his chest, feeling the frantic beat beneath. Understanding eluded him, leaving only raw unease. That night became a vigil. Elias perched on a stool near his workbench, lamp casting long shadows, determined to observe. Sleep ambushed him around one. He awoke with a start near 3, neck aching, mouth parched. His gaze snapped to the statue. It had moved, shifted subtly to the left, its head now canted slightly, as if regarding him. A chill traced patterns on his arms. Rising stiffly, he circled it, inspecting the concrete floor. Faint, shallow scratches marred the surface, tiny drag marks leading from its previous position. His flashlight beam trembled in his shaking hands. Anxiety warred with a strange fascination. One impulse screamed to call Kalen, demand he retrieve this cursed thing. Another, deeper current urged him onward, a sense that the statue required completion. He retreated upstairs, but found no solace in bed. Sleep was impossible. Around 4, the whispers returned, clearer this time, a low susurrus of multiple voices uttering alien syllables. His heart pounded, heat flushing his face. This time, he didn't descend. He remained huddled beneath the covers, eyes wide in the pre-dawn gloom, listening. Daylight revealed fresh horrors. More cracks networked across the arms and torso, the lines connecting into an intricate flowing script. Elias spent an hour scouring online databases, comparing the shapes to known alphabets, hieroglyphs, sigils. Nothing matched. A persistent knot resided in his gut. His scalp itched. His hands rubbed together compulsively. Each contact with the statue now brought that faint, rhythmic pulse, weak yet undeniable, a ghostly heartbeat that made him question his sanity. He resumed filling the fissures, but the statue seemed to actively resist. The more he mended, the more the cracks branched elsewhere, defying the epoxy. Stone dust choked the air, coating his tongue, drying his throat despite constant sips of water. By late afternoon, a desperate urgency gripped Elias. Another night like the last felt unbearable. He worked with frantic energy, slathering epoxy, smoothing edges, forcing the cracks closed. An hour later, they had reopened, tiny flakes of stone chipping away spontaneously, revealing new facets of the underlying patterns. Defeated, he switched off his tools and fled the workshop, standing in the driveway, sucking in drafts of clean air, his shirt clinging with sweat. His phone vibrated, Kalen, an inquiry about progress. Elias hesitated, the words catching in his throat. "It's difficult," he managed. Kalen pressed. "Heard anything unusual?" The question hung, heavy with unspoken knowledge. Elias evaded, promising a call back. But Kalen insisted, his tone sharpened with worry, almost frantic. "Just finish it." Elias hung up, the man's palpable anxiety feeding his own dread. Kalen knew more than he admitted. That night, Elias locked the workshop door securely, pocketing the key. He'd rigged extra lamps around the effigy, hoping intense light might deter whatever this was. Around 11, a dull, rhythmic thudding began, slow and insistent, vibrating faintly through the floorboards. It persisted for an hour. He lay rigid in bed, fists clenched, teeth grinding, a strange dizziness swimming in his head. At midnight, the whispers started anew, chillingly distinct now, weaving unintelligible narratives in the dark. His chest constricted, pulse frantic. He rose, pacing his small apartment, trying to muster courage. Near one, compulsion won. Key in hand, he unlocked the workshop and slipped inside, flashlight beam cutting the air. The extra lamps buzzed, flickering erratically. The statue was leaning. Its arms had pulled slightly away from the torso, as if initiating an impossible stretch. Elias froze, breath catching in his throat, palms slick with sweat. Wiping them on his trousers, he took a step, nearly tripping over a dropped chisel. The statue's head dipped forward. The cracks along its arms now crawled up its neck, and within them pulsed a faint, ember-like glow, too weak to illuminate but undeniably present. His stomach clenched. A high ringing filled his ears. The air felt thin. The overhead lights stuttered again. He stared, mesmerized by the glowing tracery, unsure if fatigue had finally fractured his perception. Trembling, he reached out one hand, flashlight held steady in the other. His fingers brushed the stone. Warmth radiated from it, the pulse stronger now, a definite throb. An involuntary spasm shot up his arm. He snatched his hand back as if burned. Stumbling backward, he grabbed a rag, scrubbing at his face, thoughts scattering like startled birds. The statue looked poised to move. The space between arms and torso had widened. The chipped mouth seemed stretched, agape. The flickering lights lent it a ghastly illusion of respiration. Backing away slowly, beam fixed on the figure, he fought for reason. Stone does not move. Stone does not glow. Yet the evidence assaulted his senses. An idea sparked: straps, heavy industrial belts used for securing sculptures during transit. He fetched them from a corner, approaching the statue with trepidation, half expecting it to react. Heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs, he forced himself to loop the thick canvas around the torso, cinching the arms tight against the body, securing the belts to the heavy base with redundant knots. Throughout the process, the unnerving vibration hummed through the stone into his hands. Nausea churned. When finished, the belts held the figure immobile, contained. He stepped back, panting, relief warring with terror. The faint glow still lingered in the cracks, but the statue was still. Elias remained until the first hint of dawn, pacing the confines of the workshop. Periodically, he checked the restraints. They held firm, yet he noticed new fissures snaking around the statue's base, creeping up its legs. Soft, popping sounds punctuated the silence, the sound of stone yielding under internal pressure. He tried playing music on his phone, a desperate bid to drown out the insidious whispers, but they slipped through, insidious undertones beneath the melody. As morning light finally filtered through the windows, the internal glow faded, leaving only the intricate web of cracks and that lingering, indefinable sense of animation within the stone. As soon as gray light confirmed the night's end, Elias called Kalen. His voice, thin and strained, reported he couldn't continue, attempting to articulate the impossible events. Kalen cut him off, his voice sharp, demanding completion, invoking a substantial bonus. Elias hesitated, torn, but a perverse curiosity, a need to see the conclusion of this unnatural process, swayed him. "I'll call when it's done," he conceded hollowly. The day became a cycle of vigilance and futile effort. He tightened the belts whenever a new crack threatened the statue's containment. He patched and smoothed, knowing it was likely pointless. Each application of epoxy met the familiar vibration. By late afternoon, the arcane symbols had propagated across the entire torso, an intricate tapestry covering the stone. Some glyphs were curved, others angular spirals and triangles. They seemed to shimmer at the edge of vision, subtly rearranging themselves when his gaze shifted. Exhaustion gnawed at him. His eyes burned, back screamed, fingers throbbed. Was it all hallucination born of stress? Yet the physical evidence, the cracks, the warmth, the flickering lights, the whispers, remained undeniable. The thought of smashing the statue arose, but brought with it a suffocating pressure in his chest, an internal prohibition. Something ancient and potent resided within. He felt certain. It yearned for release, for culmination, and it was pulling him along. Evening descended again. The workshop lights hummed their unsteady tune. The statue remained bound. Elias locked the door, then lingered outside, pressing his ear to the wood. The rhythmic thudding returned. A slow, subterranean beat felt through the soles of his shoes. His head pounded. Utterly spent, yet unable to leave, he re-entered the workshop, and taking up his vigil on the stool, flashlight aimed like a weapon. The cracks began to glow faintly once more. The belts groaned under immense strain. He watched the stone press outwards, the arms straining for freedom. Hand pressed to his chest, trying to regulate his breathing. He knew action was required. He picked up his chisels. His mind felt strangely blank, save for a single imperative. Finish the restoration. Perhaps completion would appease it, or at least allow him to hand it off to Kalen and sever this connection. He chipped away minute fragments near the newest fissures. The statue pulsed beneath his touch, the vibration traveling up his arm. As he worked, the glow brightened, the cracks birthing ever more complex symbols. He forced epoxy into them, smoothing, sealing. Sweat plastered his clothes to his skin. The air grew heavy with the smell of chemicals and damp, disturbed earth. For hours he labored, the belts creaked. The statue subtly shifted within its bonds. Tools clattered as his grip faltered. He shut out the impossible movements, focusing with tunnel vision on the process. Smooth, fill, seal, repeat. Then, abruptly, it ceased. The cracks stabilized. The internal luminescence ebbed away. The statue fell still, though the low, resonant hum persisted, a quiet thrumming in the charged air. Elias stepped back, gasping for breath, a disorienting wave of relief washing over him, immediately followed by a profound dread. From a technical standpoint, the restoration was complete, but the presence he felt emanating from the stone was more potent than ever. In the pre-dawn stillness, he called Kalen again. His voice trembled as he announced the work was finished. "Are you all right?" Kalen asked, a strange note in his voice. "Yes," Elias lied, the word tasting like ash. Kalen promised to collect it soon. The call ended. Elias stood motionless, staring at the effigy. Its cracked mouth remained slightly open. Its socketed eyes held abyssal emptiness. The straps bit into the stone, holding the arms fast. But he knew it was merely a temporary constraint. His heart hammered. Wiping his damp face on his sleeve, feeling utterly drained yet hyper-alert, he knew rest was impossible. Now he waits. The statue stands impassive in the center of his workshop, mended yet menacing, bound yet emanating that ceaseless quiet hum. There are no words to explain this. His pulse races. Gooseflesh prickles his arms. If he listens intently, the whispers still coil at the edges of hearing. He doesn't know what awaits when Kalen arrives, what this effigy is capable of, or what dormant power he might have inadvertently awakened by completing its form. There is no reversing this. He can only stand here, hand hovering near the door latch, flashlight a meager talisman in his other hand, listening for the crunch of tires on gravel, waiting to expel this thing from his life, and praying he hasn't unleashed something ancient and enduring upon the world. They know me at the Copper Kettle, my flock of regulars. I'm Ilara, the mixologist who anticipates their thirst before a word is spoken. It's the rhythm of the place, the predictable cadence. Arthur, punctual as twilight, claims his stout precisely at 5. Vivian's Thursday ritual demands a bone-dry gin martini, olive skewed just so. Leo transitions from espresso to sparkling water once the clock strikes 8. These are the currents I navigate, the comforting predictability. Recognizing the flow keeps me steady, keeps me safe. which is precisely why the persistent white van fractures my peace. Its first appearance, a stark anomaly 3 weeks back, positioned directly across from the pub's mullioned windows during my sunlit afternoon shift. The driver emerged, nondescript, middle-aged beneath a faded baseball cap, and ambled inside. His query? My car, the modest gray Astra parked out back in the employee's sliver of asphalt, claimed he owned the same model, wondered aloud about the transmission's temperament. Innocuous, or so it seemed in the moment. 48 hours later, the identical van materialized outside the supermarket, 5 miles distant. Different time, disparate corner of the city, yet the same man surfaced, orbiting my Astra again with the same automotive curiosity. A chill traced my spine as he intercepted me in the vastness of the parking lot, a manufactured casualness stretched thin across his features. "Fancy meeting you," he murmured, falling into unwelcome lockstep beside my rattling shopping trolley. "Meant to ask, any trouble with the steering column? Mine's developed this peculiar whine." My responses were clipped, deliberate signals of disinterest, yet his monologue persisted, an unwanted shadow clinging all the way to my vehicle. He loitered, invading my personal space as I wrestled grocery bags into the boot. Only the incidental passage of another shopper prompted his retreat, a slow withdrawal to his van, accompanied by a wave that churned my stomach. The subsequent week became a disquieting tapestry woven with sightings of the white van, lurking near my fitness studio, idling close to the Riverside Cafe where Chloe and I shared Sunday cappuccinos, occupying a space in the multiplex lot across town. Each encounter followed the grim script. He'd materialize, approach armed with questions about the Astra, and linger, an oppressive presence overstaying its welcome by heartbeats that felt like hours. I began deliberately fracturing my own patterns, weaving through unfamiliar streets to work, frequenting different grocery aisles, altering gym visits, futile efforts. The van would bloom in my rearview mirror, a ghost tethered to my bumper, or lie in wait within parking structures, anticipating my arrival as if privy to my intentions before they fully formed in my own mind. Tonight finds me miles from the copper kettle's familiar glow, tending bar at a private affair, a birthday celebration nestled deep within the suburban sprawl. Lucrative work, easily managed, I've done scores of these. Yet, as my Astris rounds the final corner onto the quiet residential street, my breath catches. It's there, the white van, parked unobtrusively half a block down. A tremor starts in my hands as I fumble with my phone, thumbs flying across the screen. White van guy, here, at the private gig. How did he know? Chloe's reply flashes instantly. Stay locked inside. Call 999 now. Before my finger can find the emergency icon, a sharp rap sounds against my driver's side window. I flinch violently, phone nearly slipping from my grasp. Relief washes over me. It's only Isabel, the evening's hostess, approaching with a welcoming smile to help me unload. Stepping out, I force a semblance of normalcy, the words tumbling out as I recount the van's appearances, the man's unnerving persistence. Isabel's welcoming expression morphs, first to bewilderment, then sharp concern. That van, she murmurs, eyes fixed down the street. It's been sitting there since early afternoon. I assumed it belonged to the carpet cleaners at the Preston's place, but they packed up hours ago. Swiftly, we transfer my bar supplies into her garage, Isabel already dialing the police, her voice firm. While we await their arrival, she summons her husband, Marcus, and a few early guests, forming a protective cluster to escort me indoors. From the threshold, I risk a glance back. Movement flickers within the van's shadowed interior. He's observing us, a silent sentinel, making no move to exit. Two uniformed officers materialize within minutes, their presence a solid counterpoint to the swirling anxiety. They stride purposefully towards the van while I watch, a captive audience behind Isabel's pristine living room window, my pulse a frantic drum against my ribs. The driver emerges, his gestures wide, agitated as he engages with the officers. Even from this distance, a flush creeps up his neck, betraying anger or perhaps acute embarrassment. One officer detaches, heading towards the house to take my statement, while her partner continues the interrogation by the van. I recount everything, each unsettling encounter, the specific locations, the relentless questions about my Astra. The policewoman listens intently, her expression hardening as she meticulously records the details. Remain inside, she instructs, her tone leaving no room for argument. We need to have an extended conversation with your admirer out there. She pauses at the door, turning back. And ma'am, it might be wise to have someone thoroughly inspect your vehicle. Individuals like this, sometimes they employ tracking devices. Nausea surges. All those inquiries about my car, not idle chatter, but reconnaissance, potential opportunities engineered to gain proximity to my Astra. Isabel, without hesitation, begins canceling the party, sending swift, apologetic messages to her invitees. Marcus, whose profession happens to be mechanics, offers immediately to examine my car right there in their driveway. As he slides beneath the chassis, flashlight beam cutting through the twilight, I stand huddled in a soft blanket Isabel provided, watching the ongoing tableau between the officers and the van driver. Got something. Marcus's voice is muffled but distinct from beneath the car. The officer taking my statement moves quickly towards the sound. Moments later, she returns, carefully bagging a small dark object, evidence. The ensuing hours dissolve into a procedural haze of detailed statements and official forms. The driver of the white van is eventually escorted away, placed securely in the back of a patrol car. A subsequent search of his vehicle uncovers additional tracking devices, alongside a disturbing collection of photographs, images focused solely on other women's cars. It becomes chillingly clear I was not his sole fixation. A detective later explains the man's nomadic pattern of stalking behavior, a history stretching across several counties. He'd relocate whenever scrutiny intensified, selecting new targets in unfamiliar towns. They'd been aware of him, peripherally, but he operated skillfully, skirting the edges of legality, until tonight. Days bleed into weeks. Every white van glimpsed in traffic sends a jolt through my system. My eyes constantly scan my rearview mirror, searching for phantom followers. Back at the Copper Kettle, management installs bright security cameras overlooking the employee parking area. Chloe presents me with a compact personal alarm, its siren piercingly loud. Isabel and Marcus now insist on walking me to my Astra after every private event I work. On Sunday afternoons, when the Copper Kettle's doors are usually closed, I begin hosting self-defense workshops in the cleared space. Women converge from across the city to learn, to voice their own anxieties, to forge a network of mutual protection. Some share fragmented stories featuring a familiar white van, near misses I never knew occurred. Gradually, painstakingly, I reclaim the rhythm of my life, but the cadence is different now, deliberately unpredictable. I vary my routes without logic, choose parking spaces bathed in streetlight, perform regular, meticulous checks of my Astra for any sign of tampering. Some might label it paranoia. I call it vigilance. One constant remains. I still know precisely what each regular drinks at the Copper Kettle, but now my observation scans for different patterns. I notice the customer who lingers too long after closing, the one whose questions stray too far into the personal, the eyes that track the female staff with unsettling intensity. The regulars see it too, an unspoken alliance forming, a web of watchful gazes. Just last week, a young woman entered the pub, visibly shaken, recounting being followed by a menacing car. Before her story was fully told, 3 regulars had quietly offered to escort her to her vehicle, while another was already discreetly contacting a friend on the police force. We watch out for one another now. Sometimes, the silhouette of a white van still appears in my mirror, and my heart performs its familiar, sickening leap. But then, the knowledge settles. I am no longer isolated in my fear. A community stands sentinel at my back, just as I stand for them. We have taken a narrative steeped in dread and reshaped it into one of fierce solidarity. And that is a pattern I embrace with fierce pride. From the shadowed heart of the corridor, the grandfather clock tolled the witching hour, each chime a bronze ripple expanding through the vacant chambers of the labyrinthine manor. Sleep shattered. I surfaced gasping, pulse a frantic drum against my ribs, uncertain whether the sound had truly pierced the silence or merely echoed from the disquieting theater of my recent dreams. As I lay suspended in the velvet dark, straining to regulate the frantic rhythm of my breath, it came again. A distinct, soft concussion from somewhere directly overhead. 3 days I'd kept vigil for the Ashworths within these echoing walls. 3 days spent wrestling down the conviction that the house's quirks, its sighs and settlings, were merely the imaginings of a mind unused to such solitary grandeur. But this sound now, punctuating the dead stillness of night from the supposedly unoccupied upper reaches, denial crumbled. A profound wrongness saturated the air, thick and undeniable. The Ashworths, figures woven into the tapestry of my family's history, had offered this house-sitting post a month's guardianship of their historic pile while they navigated European waterways. It had seemed an idyll, a magnificent dwelling entirely mine, complete with swimming pool and private cinema, a perfect summer interlude. Yet from the instant the heavy oak door had grown shut behind me, a dissonant chord had hummed beneath the surface. Nothing tangible initially, just an ambient disquiet, the persistent prickle of unseen observation. I'd waved it away as the unease of solitude in vast, unfamiliar spaces. Then began the subtler intrusions, returning to rooms only to find small objects subtly displaced. The television springing to life, casting flickering blue light into the midnight void. Once, a fleeting perception, a shadow slipping across the periphery of my vision in the long hallway. But a turn of my head revealed only empty air. I'd constructed elaborate scaffoldings of reason, old timbers contracting, provoking shifts, an arcane timer buried in the television settings, exhaustion painting phantoms at the edge of sight, hollow reassurances, even to myself. Now, pinned to the mattress by a primal dread, listening to the unmistakable cadence of footfalls traversing the floor above, those flimsy rationalizations disintegrated. This was present, palpable, and I alone had to confront it. Slowly, deliberately, I slid from the bed. The ancient floorboards groaned a protest beneath my weight. My phone's screen flared, its cold light carving a path through the gloom as my eyes scanned for defense, for anything solid. They landed on a weighty brass candlestick resting on the mahogany dresser. Scant protection, perhaps, but infinitely better than bare hands. Clutching this makeshift cudgel and the phone's beam, I slipped into the corridor. The atmosphere felt viscous, heavy, as though the house itself held its breath, poised. Towards the grand staircase I crept, each footfall an eternity, ears straining against the silence for any further betrayal from above. The second floor landing materialized from the shadows, and then again, a low, abrasive scrape, the sound of weight dragged across wood, originating from the attic's direction. My hand, gripping the candlestick, trembled violently enough to nearly lose its purchase. Every nerve shrieked retreat, urged me to flee this oppressive place and never cast a glance back. But that insidious human engine, curiosity, ground relentlessly onward. Before me loomed the attic door, a dark aperture promising ingress to the unknown. My trembling fingers reached, closed around the knob. It radiated an unnatural chill that snaked up my arm. A sharp intake of breath, a turn, a push. The phone's light sliced through the musty air, illuminating a forgotten world. Spectral furniture shrouded in white sheets, cartons overflowing with dormant memories, rafters draped in elaborate cobweb tapestries. A cursory sweep revealed nothing amiss. Then the beam snagged and caught on something that turned my blood to ice. Tucked in the furthest corner, half concealed by a leaning tower of boxes, stood a rocking chair. It swayed rhythmically, creaking softly back and forth as if its occupant had only just risen. But the space was empty, utterly empty. I stood rooted in the doorway, my thoughts refusing to coalesce around the impossible image. The rocking decelerated, hesitated, ceased. The attic plunged into an unnerving stillness. For a heartbeat, I clung to the hope of delusion. Then, with slow, undeniable deliberation, the motion resumed. A thin whimper tore from my throat. I stumbled backward, nearly tumbling down the stairs in my frantic scramble for distance. Back in my room, the door slammed shut, the reassuring thud followed by the scrape of a chair wedged firmly beneath the knob. my heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic prisoner seeking escape. The remainder of the night was spent coiled beneath the covers, each creak and groan of the old structure amplifying into a potential threat. Dawn eventually bled through the windows, finding me frayed and sleepless, adrenaline still singing in my veins. Answers were imperative. As soon as the hour felt remotely civilized, I dialed Mrs. Ashworth. My voice must have betrayed the frayed edges of my composure, for her initial warmth quickly morphed into solicitous concern. "Ilara, is everything all right? Has something happened at the house?" I drew a ragged breath, searching for words that wouldn't sound utterly unhinged. "Mrs. Ashworth, I think there's something not right here. Something difficult to explain." A protracted silence stretched across the line. When Mrs. Ashworth finally spoke, her voice was hushed, tinged with a strange resignation. "You've experienced something, haven't you?" The question blindsided me. Yes. How could you know?" A heavy sigh traveled through the receiver. "Because we have to. We simply chose not to give it credence. We hoped that by ignoring it, perhaps it would cease." My mind struggled to absorb the implication. They knew all along. What is it? What haunts this place? "We can't be certain," Mrs. Ashworth admitted, "but the people we bought it from, they shared the local lore about the original family, the Thorns who built the house, about the tragedy that unfolded within these walls." She then unfurled a narrative that seeped like winter chill into my bones. The manor, erected in the late 1800s by Silas Thorne, a man of industry and wealth, for his wife Isabel and their young daughter Lillian. Their domestic bliss proved ephemeral. Lillian succumbed to an enigmatic ailment, wasting away despite the frantic consultations of myriad physicians. Silas Thorne, desperate, turned from medicine to shadow, delving into occult practices, conducting rituals within the attic's confines in a tragically misguided effort to mend his child. His efforts, however, didn't heal. They fractured something, opened a conduit to realms best left undisturbed. Lillian perished. Silas, consumed by grief and perhaps by what he had unleashed, ended his own life. Isabel, shattered by loss and the horrors she'd witnessed, lived out her days confined to an asylum. The house stood untenanted for decades, acquiring a dark patina of misfortune. "We dismissed it," Mrs. Ashworth concluded, her voice thin. "Local superstition, we told ourselves. But then incidents began. Small things at first, but escalating." Her words dwindled, leaving the unspoken hanging heavy in the air. Suddenly, their eagerness for this extended voyage, their haste to distance themselves from the property, resonated with chilling clarity. "What do I do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Leave," Mrs. Ashworth commanded, her tone regaining a measure of firmness. "Ilara, pack your bags immediately and leave. We'll arrange for someone else. I am so profoundly sorry we involved you in this. We should have told you. Anger flickered, the urge to ray at their secrecy, their negligence. But the genuine remorse in her voice extinguished it. They were ensnared by this house too, captives in their own right. Disconnecting the call, I moved with purpose, gathering my scattered belongings. As I navigated the rooms, the sensation of being watched intensified, the very air seeming to thicken, resisting my departure. My hand was on the front doorknob, freedom inches away, when I heard it one last time, that soft, dull impact from the upper floor. Against all reason, my gaze lifted towards the head of the stairs, and there she stood, a small figure, spectral and pale in an antiquated dress, her eyes vast pools of sorrow and silent entreaty. A small hand lifted, a gesture of reaching, before she dissolved into the shadows. I didn't walk. I ran until the cool metal of my car was beneath my hand, until my bags were flung haphazardly onto the back seat, until the engine roared and tires spun on the gravel drive. As I accelerated away, a final reflexive glance into the rearview mirror captured the house, silent, imposing, its windows like vacant eyes observing my flight. And framed high in the attic window, a small hand pressed against the glass. I could have sworn I saw the girl, Lillian, watching me go. I never returned. The Ashworths, I later learned, sold the property swiftly, relocating across the country, seeking refuge from its lingering influence. Yet sometimes, in the deep stillness of night, the attic reappears in my dreams. The relentless sway of the empty rocking chair, the desolate gaze of the girl reaching across time, and I am left to wonder if fleeing was truly an escape, or if some infinitesimal fragment of that house, some stray shadow, hitched itself to my soul, destined to follow me through all the days to come. The quietude of my recent tenancy was a thin veneer over the building's ancient size. Nightfall amplified its repertoire, the groaning timbers, the spectral sigh of wind through unseen fissures, sounds one learns to domesticate with flimsy rationalizations about plumbing or settling foundations. Alone, however, cocooned in the hush of the late hour, such noises acquire teeth. Acclamation, I told myself, just acclamation. Scarcely a week had passed since I'd succumbed to the allure of this historic quarter, seduced by its time-worn grace and improbable affordability. My dwelling, Ilara's modest birth, crowning the 4-story edifice, wore its age heavily. Yet charm persisted in the soaring ceilings, the tall, naked windows framing the city's slumber, and the venerable hardwood floors that chronicled every footfall with a resonant creak. That particular evening bled into night, dissolving under the television's artificial glow after a day that had stretched taut. Eventually, the screen went dark, the rituals of teeth and readiness for bed performed under a growing wave of exhaustion. It was perhaps the first hour past midnight when I finally surrendered to the sheets, letting the apartment's profound stillness beckon sleep. Then, perception snagged on an anomaly. Faint at first, elusive as a half-remembered dream, the ghost of a footfall overhead, an impossibility given my position, the apex apartment. Above me, theoretically, only roof and sky existed. My mind, clinging to logic, offered the building's nocturnal adjustments. Old structures breathe, settle, don't they? Yet the cadence persisted, slow, measured, traversing the unseen expanse directly above my ceiling, a deliberate weight where no floor should be. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Eyes snapping open, I stared into the oppressive darkness overhead, the sound undeniably real, no figment of a tired mind. Someone, something was walking, pacing with intention, directly above me. I sat bolt upright in bed, reason scrabbling for purchase. An attic? No known access, no mention in the lease. Still, the perambulation continued, each step placed with unnerving precision, as if intimately familiar with the geography of that impossible space. Swinging my legs out of bed, the floorboards groaning their ascent, I felt a cold spike of fear. My phone's beam sliced the gloom as I ventured into the hallway, a trembling beacon against the encroaching shadows. The steps marched on, unhurried, directly above my position. Courage faltered. My limbs felt like poured lead. To seek the source felt like inviting madness, peering into a place that shouldn't exist. Suddenly, abrupt silence descended, utter stillness, amplifying the frantic pulse in my ears. I waited, breath held captive in my chest, listening for any further disturbance. Nothing. The apartment settled back into its quietude, as if the phantom steps had evaporated. Perhaps fatigue, perhaps frayed nerves conjuring specters from the old building's groans. Shaken, I retreated to bed, though sleep remained a distant shore, elusive for long hours. The following day blurred past in the routine of work, the incident receding almost into the realm of unsettling dreams. Almost. Evening brought me back through the front door, and with it, a subtle but pervasive wrongness. An odor permeated the air, stale, cloying, thick with the suggestion of hidden decay, like something long forgotten left to spoil. Not the trash. The kitchen was clear. It seemed to emanate impossibly from the ceiling itself. As night deepened, the memory of the footsteps refused to stay buried. My gaze kept drifting upward, half expectant, half dreading. The hours passed uneventfully, however, and a fragile sense of normalcy began to reassert itself. I almost managed to convince myself it had all been overwrought imagination. Then, around the second hour past midnight, the familiar rhythm resumed. Louder this time, more insistent, a clear, undeniable declaration of presence. My skin crawled, prickling with a primal fear. I snatched my phone, fingers fumbling, mind racing. Call Alistair, the landlord. Report ceiling pedestrians. The thought sounded ludicrous even in the privacy of my own terror. The police? For what? Creaking boards, an overactive imagination. Before any decision could crystallize, the pacing halted once more, precisely overhead. A beat of charged silence, then a sickening thump. Solid, heavy, as if a great weight had plummeted to the floor above. Immediately, it was followed by a rasping, dragging sound, something dense, cumbersome, being laboriously pulled across the unseen boards. Terror, rendered me immobile, a statue carved from dread beneath the unseen stage. I lay there, listening as the dragging noise scraped its way across the void above, an eternity contained within those agonizing moments. Eventually, the sound faded, leaving only the echo of fear and the certainty of wakefulness until dawn. Morning found me dialing Alistair. I recounted the noises, the footsteps, the thud, the dragging, my voice tight, trying to sound rational while describing the impossible. I inquired point blank about any attic or crawl space. Surprise colored his tone. No, nothing like that existed above the top floor units, he assured me. Probably just the pipes settling, love, he offered, though conviction entirely eluded his voice. He promised vaguely to have someone look into it, a promise I felt certain he wouldn't keep, dismissing me as a nervous new tenant. Days bled into a tense quietude. The footsteps remained absent, yet the feeling of observation, of sharing the space, intensified, clinging like the persistent musty odor, that stubborn testament to something unseen and festering. Then, one night, adrift in the restless space between wakefulness and sleep, a new sound emerged. Not steps this time, but a delicate tapping emanating from the plaster directly above my bed. Softly at first, then gaining rhythm, insistence, like fingernails seeking purchase from the other side. I scrambled upright, phone light instantly cast upward. My breath hitched, lodging painfully in my throat. A fracture, thin as thread, marred the ceiling's expanse. A new wound, undeniably fresh, originating precisely where the tapping seemed focused. Even as I watched, transfixed in horror, the tapping persisted from within, and the crack spiderwebbed, widening infinitesimally, visibly pushed outwards by an unseen pressure. That was the precipice. No rationalization remained, no comforting explanation could hold against the visual evidence. I snatched my keys, the apartment's mundane objects suddenly alien and threatening in their familiarity. Lights blazed, the door left unsecured, details lost in the frantic surge for the exit, for the indifferent anonymity of the street below. I drove, destination coalescing into Lena's place, a sanctuary found deep in the night, the explanation deferred for the sanity of the moment. The subsequent call to Alistair was terse, stripped of ambiguity, demanding action on the damaged ceiling. His reply, hours later, after the maintenance man, Kai, had supposedly investigated, confirmed the impossible. No attic, no crawl space, nothing. Just solid structure, joists, and roofing above my former rooms. I never crossed that threshold again. The lease, broken, the deposit, forfeit, a small price for escaping the grasp of that place. What resided in the non-existent space above my apartment remains unknown, a chilling enigma. Some vacancies, I now understand, are not merely physical. Some voids are best left entirely undisturbed. Confession feels alien to my tongue, the words catch, roughened by disuse. A certain recollection coils tight within the gut whenever my thoughts drift back to the genesis, the day I unearthed something within an old timepiece that fractured my perceptions of existence. My name is Elias Thorne, and I am, or perhaps was, merely a horologist. My world, circumscribed by the patient tick and and whir of escapements and balance wheels was one of meticulous order. I found solace in the predictable pulse of a well-regulated mechanism. Then came the discovery, nestled deep within the carcass of an antique regulator clock, a hidden artifice that forever warped the steady cadence of my life. Now time itself feels compromised. Permit me to trace the beginning. I occupied my sanctuary, a cramped atelier tucked behind the modest facade of my shop. Shelves groaned under the weight of brass components, dormant clock faces, and coiled springs, a constellation of potential time. At the room's heart stood my workbench, a scarred landscape of wood beneath the unwavering glare of articulated lamps, beside which my swivel chair would offer its familiar groan. On that specific afternoon, my attention was devoted to a towering grandfather clock, a scarred veteran of passing decades. Its mahogany case bore the fissures of age, its brasswork dulled, its intricate heart stubbornly silent. Having just liberated the main gear train for restorative care, my eye snagged on an anomaly, a small, flush metal plate low on the cabinet's inner back wall. A dissonant note in the clock's familiar anatomy, a tremor unfamiliar and sharp, ran through me. Secrets were not the usual currency of my trade. With the delicate probe of a fine screwdriver, I coaxed the plate free. It yielded with a soft click, revealing a cavity. Therein lay a compact mechanism, swaddled in aged chamois leather. Reverently, I lifted it into the lamplight's cone. Palm-sized, intricate, it pulsed with a latent energy. Gears meshed within, yes, but arranged in a logic-defying known chronometry. Esoteric switches dotted its surface. A jolt, not of fear, but of profound, unnerving excitement shot through me. In all my years coaxing life back into dormant timepieces, nothing had prepared me for this. I placed it upon the bench, its alien presence dominating the familiar clutter. My examination began. A miniature winding key protruded from its side. Tentatively, I gave it a turn. A series of precise clicks, followed by a near-subliminal whirring, emanated from within. My gaze fell upon a tiny lever near the apex. I nudged it. Silence. Another lever, positioned near the base, beckoned. The instant my finger actuated that lower switch, the world fell mute. The ambient symphony of my workshop, the low hum of the lamps, the collective murmur of ticking from the shelves, the protesting squeak of my chair as I shifted, abruptly ceased. Utter stillness descended. I looked about, bewildered, noticing how even the motes of dust dancing in the light beams hung suspended, arrested mid-fall. My own respiration roared in my ears, amplified by the vacuum. A dryness clawed at my throat. Rising slowly, my knees felt strangely insubstantial. Habit guided my hand toward the lamp cord, a futile gesture. The light shone steady, unwavering, yet somehow robbed of its vibrance. It was illumination trapped in amber. I navigated the sudden quiet towards the workshop door, my footsteps echoing unnaturally in the void. No traffic sounds bled through from the street, no hint of movement from the shop beyond. The doorknob felt colder than it should. Pushing it open revealed a tableau of absolute stasis. The front counter stood unattended. Near a waste bin, a common housefly was pinned against the invisible canvas of the frozen moment. The knot in my stomach tightened into a fist. I waved a hand, slow and deliberate, before the insect. No flicker, no response. It remained, a tiny petrified jewel in the air. Panic, cold and sharp, surged. I retreated to the workbench, my eyes locked on the bizarre contraption. A pressure began to build in my chest, a suffocating weight restricting my breath. My visions swam. Convinced I would lose consciousness if I didn't reverse the process, I fumbled for the lower lever, snapping it back. Instantly, the world rushed back in, the lamps hum, the distant city pulse, the fly resuming its erratic trajectory. I slumped against the bench, hands trembling violently, the ghost of silence still ringing in my ears. For the remainder of that day, I guarded my secret. I bent over the grandfather clock, feigning normalcy for the occasional customer, but my mind orbited obsessively around the device, now concealed beneath a shop rag. The implications were staggering, terrifying. That evening, long after the last patron departed and the door was bolted, I returned to the workshop's shadowed confines. The urge to understand, to verify, was irresistible. I wound the mechanism as before, then, with a held breath, engaged the lower lever. Stillness reclaimed the room. My lamp persisted, a lone beacon in the temporal void, illuminating a world where the only discernible sound was the frantic drumming of my own heart against my ribs. One step, then another. The air felt thick, resistant, like wading through unseen syrup. I nudged a fountain pen from the desk's edge. It hung there, defying gravity, descending with unnatural sloth. A gentle touch sent it drifting laterally before I withdrew my hand. Then, the familiar constriction returned to my chest. The edges of my sight began to blur. Fighting a rising wave of nausea, I reached out, disengaged the lever. Reality snapped back into focus. The pen clattered loudly onto the floorboards as I gasped, drawing air into starved lungs. There was a price, a limit, a temporal tether, short and unforgiving. The ensuing days became a clandestine exploration. I discovered my tolerance threshold, perhaps 30 seconds within the stilled current before weakness and vertigo claimed me. Any longer invited disorientation. Confined to the after-hours solitude of my workshop, I conducted small experiments, freezing time, traversing the room, repositioning minor objects, then hastily retreating to the normal flow. My few acquaintances, my loyal clientele, they remained ignorant. How could I articulate such a phenomenon without inviting disbelief, ridicule, or worse, covetous attention? The fear of being branded mad, or of having the artifact wrested from me, was a constant shadow. One evening, emboldened, I ventured beyond the shop door while under the device's influence. It was late, perhaps 9. The pavements were largely deserted, though vehicles still glided along the thoroughfare. Activating the mechanism street side, I watched the world seize. Cars halted mid-motion, their headlights frozen beams. I circled a parked sedan, observing the driver, a man petrified in the act of reaching across the passenger seat. My pulse hammered a frantic rhythm as I drew nearer. A tentative tap on his window yielded nothing. I recoiled. The silence out here was immense, crushing. My breathing grew shallow. That telltale tightness gripped my chest once more. And then, a flicker, a distortion in the polished curve of the car's side mirror. I spun around, eyes scanning the empty street behind me. Nothing. Yet a distinct chill traced its path down my spine despite the perfectly still air. Urgently, I deactivated the device, stumbling back towards the sanctuary of my shop, lungs aching, sweat stinging my eyes. Subsequent excursions into the frozen moment, undertaken with mounting trepidation over the following week, confirmed I wasn't merely succumbing to stress. Each time, I perceived anomalies, fleeting movements glimpsed peripherally. Sometimes, a deepening of shadow, coalescing momentarily into a vague form before dissolving. Other times, a pallid flicker, like drapery stirred by a non-existent breeze, just beyond a threshold. My palms grew slick, my heart a frantic prisoner in my chest. I took to leaving the workshop lights burning throughout the night, a futile ward against the encroaching darkness these phenomena represented. One night, consumed by the need for certainty, I resolved to capture evidence. Perhaps my senses were betraying me. I positioned a small digital camera on the workbench, aimed it towards the back room, and initiated recording. Then, I flipped the lever. Naturally, the camera froze along with everything else, a fool's errand. Undeterred, I stepped into the deeper recesses of the workshop, forcing my gaze to sweep every corner, every shadowed alcove. My limbs felt leaden, my mouth arid. I strained my ears against the profound silence, and then I heard it, a faint, abrasive scraping, metal dragged across concrete, the sound seeming to originate from above. My scalp prickled. I spun, searching the rafters. Nothing. I moved swiftly towards the main shop area, the pressure in my chest intensifying rapidly. Seconds later, the physical toll forced my retreat. I snapped the lever back. The mundane sounds of the shop returned, jarringly loud. My heart felt dangerously close to rupturing. Yet I persisted, or shorter intervals became my strategy. 5 seconds, 10, eyes darting, seeking, trying to resolve the fleeting glimpses. One evening, during one such brief temporal suspension, I caught it, an outline near the rear exit. Tall, indistinct, its edges seemed to shimmer, to ripple like heat haze. It so shifted. My breath hitched. My hands trembled uncontrollably. A profound inability to draw air gripped me. Panic seized me, rooting me to the spot. The entity, for what else could it be, moved again, a slow, deliberate undulation. Then the chest pain flared, fierce and demanding. I slapped the lever back. Normalcy crashed in. The space by the door was empty, yet a residual coldness lingered there, palpable and wrong. My appetite waned. Sleep offered little respite, haunted by indistinct shapes moving in silent landscapes. The mechanism, my terrible prize, resided now in a small, sturdy safe beneath my workbench. I fought the urge to retrieve it, attempting to immerse myself in the familiar, grounding routine of my craft. But the gravitational pull of the unknown was relentless. Each tentative return to the frozen state was fueled by a desperate hope for understanding, yet yielded only further unsettling glimpses of those presences. Sometimes humanoid silhouettes, stark against the static backdrop. Other times, grotesquely altered figures, possessed of superfluous limbs or impossibly elongated torsos. Always distant, always elusive, flickering at the periphery. Were they observers, or merely inhabitants of that silent realm, indifferent to my intrusion? The thought of destroying the device surfaced repeatedly. I envisioned smashing it with a hammer, grinding its unnatural gears to dust. Once I held it poised above a waste bin, the impulse fierce, but I couldn't. The sheer terrifying power it represented, the ability to command moments, held an intoxicating allure that overshadowed the dread. Perhaps, I reasoned, these entities were harmless, mere phantoms of the stilled world. They had never approached, never threatened directly. Yet an unshakable intuition warned that proximity equated to peril. The anxiety gnawed relentless. One night found me again tending to the old grandfather clock, the very vessel of my discovery. Its restoration was nearly complete. As I meticulously polished the heavy brass pendulum, my gaze kept straying to the safe. Eventually, the clock forgotten, I knelt, retrieved the mechanism, its cool metal unnervingly familiar, in my palm. I wound the key, felt the faint internal whirring begin. Then I threw the lever. Silence engulfed my workshop once more. Almost immediately, a scraping sound echoed from overhead, louder this time, distinctly like something heavy being dragged across the wooden rafters. My heart leaped. My hand sought the solid reassurance of the workbench. The scraping intensified directly above me. My eyes scanned the clutter for a weapon, settling on a small mallet. I gripped its handle, knuckles white. Sweat beaded on my forehead, tracing cold paths down my temples. Then, abruptly, the sound ceased. I waited, breath held captive in my aching chest, straining against the oppressive silence. The pressure mounted. I couldn't endure it. I flipped the lever. The familiar sounds rushed back. Traffic, lamp hum, my own ragged breathing. Air. I needed air. Locking the shop, I took the mechanism home, unable to leave it behind. Sleep remained elusive, punctuated by phantom scrapes and whispers. By morning, a desperate hypothesis had formed. I drove to a secluded park, a place of trees and water and open space. Finding a deserted spot near the edge of a small pond, I waited until I was certain I was unobserved. Then, I engaged the device. The pond's surface instantly transformed into a sheet of flawless glass, disturbed only by the frozen ripples radiating from my presence. My eyes swept the surroundings, trees, benches, pathways, all locked in time. A rustle, soft, dry, from behind a large oak. I tensed, the mechanism clutched tight. A figure gray and indistinct leaned partially into view from behind the trunk. It possessed an arm unnaturally long, reaching frozen in the act of touching a low-hanging branch. Nausea churned within me. My pulse throbbed violently at my temples. I could almost discern a face, but it remained frustratingly blurred, like breath fogging a mirror. Slowly, deliberately, I backed away, never breaking eye contact. It remained still, observing me with its unknowable gaze. My eyes burned, my breathing shallow and rapid. Turning, I simultaneously disengaged the lever. The pond stirred, leaves whispered, birds resumed their calls. Behind the oak, there was nothing but dappled sunlight. So now, I sit again in my workshop, this narrative extracted from me like a reluctant tooth. The mechanism rests in its steel prison, yet its psychic weight is immense. My hands tremble whenever the safe door swings open. What those entities are, dwelling within the interstices of arrested time, remains a terrifying enigma. A part of me, the horologist perhaps, yearns for understanding, for a glimpse behind the veil. Another, more primal part, screams for oblivion, for the satisfying crunch of the hammer blow. For now, it remains locked away. A week has passed since I last touched it, yet my eyes constantly scan the periphery, anticipating a flicker, a distortion in the familiar contours of my workspace. My heart still seizes at any unexpected movement, reflected in glass or shadow. I cannot fathom the reality of those frozen moments, nor the origins of the silent watchers who inhabit them. I know only that they are there, and sometimes, in the deepest quiet of the night, I feel their collective gaze, waiting for my return. Whether I will ever find the nerve or the folly to throw that lever again, I cannot say. But if I do, my finger will hover, poised for immediate retreat. That much is certain. The silence deepens its menace with each visit, and my luck, I fear, is a finite resource. This is all I can offer. The telling leaves me raw, exposed, as if something might even now be coalescing in the corner of my eye. I am finished speaking of it, but you wish to know how it began. Thus it began, and thus the steady, comforting tick of a clock is lost to me, perhaps forever. An awareness, sharp and unwelcome, pricked the edges of my consciousness that first evening, settling into the bones of the old house. I remember the sag of the inherited sofa beneath me, the scent of cardboard lingering from the kitchen boxes I'd just wrestled empty, and then a vibration more felt than heard, threading through the quiet air from the hallway's terminus. A low, rhythmic susurrus, like a prayer wheel turning just beyond the threshold of perception, barely audible, yet undeniably present. I stilled myself, breath held captive, straining to isolate the source. It emanated from the final bedroom, the one swallowed by shadows at the corridor's far end, a space I designated last, leaving it utterly bare. Its door hung ajar, its window a black, uncurtained eye staring into the night. Logic dictated silence from such a void. Bare walls, naked floorboards, nothing to resonate or hum. Compelled, I rose. My steps were tentative down the length of the hall, each footfall swallowed by the runner. The instant my shadow stretched across the threshold, the sound dissolved, utterly, leaving behind a silence so profound it felt viscous. Inside, emptiness reigned. My gaze swept the geometry of the room, corners sharp and clean, the ceiling unblemished, the pale wood grain of the floor undisturbed. Through the window, only the mundane tableau of a neighbor's fence and the distant watery lights of houses across the asphalt river of the street. Behind me, the refrigerator's drone was a familiar anchor in the sudden sonic vacuum. Retreating to the living room, I tried to weave a tapestry of rational explanations. Wind whistling through an unseen crack, a neighbor's distant radio bleeding through the walls, voices drifting from the sidewalk. Yet barely 10 minutes had elapsed, the cushions still reforming around my absence, when the murmur seeped back into the room. The same hypnotic cadence, the same texture, a human voice, seemingly, yet stripped of language, reduced to a repetitive, hushed intonation, as if guarding a secret. Again, I moved, this time with a predator's stealth. The hallway was a deeper gloom now, lit only by the spill from the living room lamp behind me. Sock-footed, I ghosted along the floorboards, concentrating on silence. Closer, closer I crept, the humming persisting, a tangible presence in the darkness. It held steady until the very lip of the doorway. The moment I breached the invisible boundary, leaning my head into the room's airspace, gone, vanished like breath on cold glass. I fumbled for the overhead light switch, flooding the space with stark illumination. Corners interrogated, the narrow space behind the door examined, the window scrutinized once more. Nothing. Barren, silent, utterly solitary. A fine constellations of sweat bloomed on my brow, my skin prickling. This wasn't right. The house, though possessed of age, wasn't derelict. Renovations, the landlord had assured me, were recent. The walls felt substantial, yielding no obvious flaws, no conduits for external whispers. I extended my search, venturing into the adjacent vacant bedroom, peering into its closet's shallow depth, kneeling to inspect the window frame, pressing my ear against the dividing wall. An exercise in futility. Silence answered silence. That night, sleep was a fortress I retreated to, securing the door of my own bedroom, situated blessedly far from the hallway's end, near the kitchen's familiar hum. Apprehension coiled in my gut, anticipating the sound's return, but exhaustion eventually claimed me, pulling me under into a dreamless quiet. Daylight brought a semblance of normalcy. My energies were poured into constructing my workspace, my digital tether to the outside world. Cables snaked across the floor, the computer tower whirred to life, the internet connection established. The neighborhood itself seemed complicit in this daytime peace, a gentle quiet punctuated only by birdsong, the drone of my machine, the sporadic bark of a distant dog. Several times, drawn by a morbid curiosity, I visited the problematic room. It remained stubbornly ordinary under the sun's scrutiny. White walls, a window framing the front lawn, the unadorned wooden floor. No hidden panels winked from the walls. No floorboards hinted at secrets beneath. My knuckles rapped against plaster, seeking hollowness, finding only solidity. Evening descended, and with it the fragile truce dissolved. Post-dinner, I positioned myself in the living room, a sentinel in the quiet. The television remained dark. The door to the far bedroom stood open, an invitation. An hour crawled by before the familiar resonance returned, that low, unwavering vibration, the wordless chant weaving itself into the stillness from the empty room. A chill traced my spine. My pulse quickened its rhythm against my ribs. Slowly, deliberately, I rose. This time, no direct approach. I moved with painstaking slowness, minimizing the pressure of each step, attempting to arrive unheard. The humming persisted, growing marginally clearer as I neared the doorway. It was undeniably vocal, a calm, low-pitched thrumming. I risked peering around the jam, craning my neck to see without crossing the threshold. Empty, window secured, floor bare, then a single decisive step forward, planting my foot just inside the room. Instantaneous silence. The fine hairs on my arms lifted. Again, the futile check behind the door, the scan of the ceiling, the opening of the window to survey the vacant street outside, only parked cars sleeping under the jaundiced glow of a distant porch light. I sealed the window, the click of the latch loud in the sudden quiet, and retreated once more. An idea sparked. Capture it. My phone emerged, the recording app summoned. I sat, poised, waiting. 30 minutes stretched taut before the sound began anew. Recording initiated. Holding the phone aloft like a talisman, I crept forward, a silent hunter stalking an invisible prey. The humming continued, a steady pulse in the dark, until the very moment I angled the phone into the room. Silence. Playback yielded only the whisper of my own breath, the ambient hiss of an empty recording. A frustrated sigh escaped me, tension knotting the muscles in my neck. I paced the hallway, flicking the overhead light on, off, on again, as if the rhythm might disrupt the phenomenon. I tried standing motionless, just outside the bedroom door for long stretches. Nothing. The sound seemed conditional, requiring my presence elsewhere. In the living room, the kitchen, some remove was necessary for its manifestation. A new strategy formed that night. I deployed my phone recording app active, placing it deep within the empty room before retreating to my own bedroom, closing the door behind me. An hour passed in strained listening. Returning, I paused at the threshold. Silence. Inside, the room was still. Retrieving the phone, I scanned the recording. There, midway through, a fleeting, faint murmur surfaced for perhaps 3 seconds before abruptly cutting off. Indistinct, genderless, just a low thrum swallowed by static. Repeated listening offered no further clarity. Unease began to permeate my waking hours, a low-grade anxiety that clung like damp air. Evenings in the house felt charged, the hallway a territory to be navigated with caution. Work became a refuge, routine a shield. Music became a constant companion, headphones a barrier against the silence that might birth the sound. But inevitably, in moments of quiet, a pause in the music, the television muted during commercials, the humming would reassert itself, a persistent auditory ghost from the empty chamber. I tried rapping sharply on the hallway wall adjacent to the room while the sound was active. It ceased instantly. I tried calling out, "Is anyone there?" Only silence answered. The attic yielded nothing but insulation and dust motes dancing in the flashlight beam. The crawl space beneath the house revealed only pipes and cobwebs. A stepladder granted me intimate access to the bedroom ceiling. No vents, no hidden speakers, simple wiring. The window frame, solid. The closet, shallow and unremarkable. Sleep became reliant on the television's drone, a constant electronic murmur to mask the other. It offered partial solace, though temptation often won, leading me to lower the volume, straining to hear if the humming persisted. It always did, never louder, never shifting in its low, steady pitch, and always vanishing the second I attempted to enter its domain. Another experiment, an old baby monitor set, unearthed from storage. I placed the transmitter inside the empty room, the receiver accompanying me to the living room. Static hissed, then eventually the humming emerged, transmitted electronically. It sounded clearer now, almost melodic, a short, repeating sequence of notes. Receiver clutched tight. I hurried down the hall. Predictably, the sound cut out before I reached the door. The transmitter sat undisturbed. My appetite waned. Fatigue became a constant companion, frayed nerves my default state. The thought of calling the landlord surfaced and was dismissed. How to articulate this phantom sound without sounding unhinged? Involving friends felt equally fraught, an embarrassing admission of a potentially illusory problem, an unwelcome invitation into my private disturbance. One night, driven by a mix of desperation and defiance, I resolved to sleep in the room itself. A sleeping bag unfurled on the bare wood floor. Lights extinguished, I lay enveloped in darkness, listening to the house settle around me. Time stretched, silence deepened. As drowsiness began to blur the edges of awareness, the humming returned, but altered. It seemed distant now, perhaps originating elsewhere in the house, yet unmistakably the same sound. I sat bolt upright. Instant silence. Heart hammering, skin damp, the faint scent of dust sharp in my nostrils, the air unnervingly cold. I waited for hours in that rigid posture, but the sound remained absent as long as I occupied the space. The following day left me hollowed out, frustration curdling into anger. I stood in the center of the empty room and spoke aloud, addressing that unseen, pleading for peace, stating my lack of ill intent. The walls absorbed my words without response. It remained just a room, stark and silent under the indifferent light. 2 weeks dissolved into this pattern. Enough. A more archaic tool was required. I borrowed an old handheld tape recorder from a friend, hoping its analog nature might capture what the phone could not. I positioned it in the hallway, just outside the room, set it to record, and retreated to the living room's dim quiet. The humming obliged, spooling out into the stillness. I let it establish itself for several minutes before creeping forward, inching the recorder closer to the source. Near the threshold, silence. The tape yielded the same result. A few faint seconds of the hum, frustratingly elusive. I tried opening the bedroom window and listening from the front yard, receiver of the baby monitor in hand. Nothing. Only when I returned inside, settled back into the living room's geography, did the sound regenerate. It was intrinsically internal, bound to that specific room, yet repelled by my immediate presence. Stalemate. Moving again was unthinkable. The deposits paid, the utilities connected, the sheer effort of relocation. Yet the evenings grew increasingly strained. I began to self-exile from the living room after dark, spending more time sealed in my bedroom, music a constant buffer. Still, curiosity remained a persistent itch. One evening, I attempted a flanking maneuver, approaching from the kitchen side, moving low, trying to remain unseen, unheard. The humming held, until the precise instant my gaze swept into the room. Silence snapped back into place. Familiarity never bred contempt, only a fresh jolt of adrenaline, the thudding heart, the clammy palms, the shallow breath. The idea of furnishing the room, claiming it, felt repellent. The thought of arranging furniture, my back turned to the space where that sound might bloom and vanish, induced a wave of nausea. Earplugs became a nightly ritual. A fan added its white noise to my bedroom's soundscape. Some nights, ignorance was achievable. Others, the need to know, to check, would pull me from my room into the hallway's charged silence. Always the same choreography, the hum from afar, the silence upon approach. No source was ever unearthed, no speaker discovered, no hidden device revealed, no figure ever glimpsed. My challenges, if someone is there, say something, met only with the humming's return when my attention shifted. Shining a flashlight beam from a distance, illuminated only emptiness. Placing a chair against the wall facing the door, a silent sentinel changed nothing. Ultimately, An uneasy truce was reached through acceptance. Quiet evenings in the living room became rare indulgences. Music played or the television murmured. Sometimes I simply left, driving aimlessly under the streetlights to escape the house's subtle tension, returning late to walk directly to my bedroom. Mornings invariably restored a fragile sense of the ordinary. The room at the end of the hall reverted to mere architecture. 4 walls, a window, devoid of stains, marks, or peculiar odors. What generates the sound remains a mystery, locked within the house's fabric. I never cornered it, never witnessed its genesis. It remains meticulously careful, retreating into silence at my approach. It hasn't escalated, hasn't changed its quiet, low tune. It simply persists, a steady hum that ceases the second I cross the threshold. I still reside here. The humming still whispers from the end of the hall on occasion. I've ceased my investigations, abandoned the quest for explanation. I maintain my distance. I live my life around it. There seems little else to do. A lone thumb, skeletal against the void beside the highway. That semaphore of need I should have ignored. Impulse, masquerading as kindness, had me break. Now, twin embers of ill will burn back at me from the rearview glass, reflecting a truth I can no longer deny. This steel shell hurtling through the ink is a cage, the asphalt ribbon outside an indifferent warden, and beside me sits damnation, disguised as a passenger. Hours had bled together on the return leg of some forgettable corporate errand. The world outside the headlamp beams was pure conjecture, save for the fleeting glint off some unseen creature's retina. Static gnawed at the edges of a dead radio frequency, a sound mirroring the fraying edges of my own awareness. Bone-deep weariness had settled in, a heavy cloak, and then, materializing from the roadside gloom, a silhouette, arm extended, thumb angled skyward, the ancient plea of the stranded. A fleeting connection across the rushing dark. His eyes, was it desperation or something else, tripped the wire of my conscience. Gravel spat under the tires as I eased onto the shoulder. A phantom echo of maternal warnings whispered caution, but the wind biting at the glass spoke of exposure, of miles unwound between nowhere and nothing. Who abandons a soul to that? The passenger door yawned, sucking in a vortex of frigid air. Obliged, he rasped, folding himself onto the seat. Thought I might take root out there. Close up, he seemed unremarkable. 30s perhaps, stubble shadowing his jaw, a battered denim jacket. An aroma clung to him. Stale tobacco, yes, but beneath it, something acrid, metallic almost. Sure, I murmured, merging back into the flow. Destination? Just the next speck of light on the map, he answered, his voice like rust on iron. Folks call me Silas. Elias, I returned, keeping my gaze fixed ahead. What lands a man roadside on a night like this, Silas? A dry chuckle escaped him, a sound like stones tumbling in a dry well, prickling the hairs on my neck. Ah, you know, the currents of existence, they deposit you in unexpected eddies. Silence descended then, thick and weighted. I wrestled my focus back to the hypnotism of the white lines unspooling before us, yet a knot of disquiet tightened low in my gut. An indefinable dissonance emanated from the man beside me. The clock on the dash dripped minutes into the vast, swallowing dark outside. A peripheral awareness registered his stillness, his gaze. When I risked a glance, I found his eyes locked onto me, unblinking. A smile stretched his lips, thin and predatory, utterly devoid of warmth. "Tell me, Elias," he broke the quiet, his voice soft now, insidious. "Is this your habit, playing Samaritan in the dead of night?" A strangled laugh hitched in my throat. "Hardly, just felt generous tonight." "My good fortune, then," Silas replied, the words coated in something that tasted nothing like gratitude. The silence returned, amplifying the drone of the tires, the frantic thrumming beneath my ribs. Paranoia, I told myself, just the dark playing tricks. Then a subtle shift in his posture, a lean forward. Moonlight, sharp and unforgiving, kissed the edge of something nestled inside his jacket, a sliver of polished steel. Ice flooded my veins. My grip on the wheel became a vice, knuckles straining white. "Something amiss, Elias?" Silas inquired, his voice slick with mock solicitude. "You've lost your color." My throat constricted. "Fine," I managed, the word brittle. "Just fatigue setting in." "Perhaps a pause is in order," he suggested, his hand drifting oh so casually towards the hidden object. "Stretch the legs." "No." The denial sprang out, too sharp, too fast. "No, I'm good. The town's not far now." His eyes, losing all trace of civility, hardened into chips of obsidian. "I believe you misunderstand the situation, Elias. We will be stopping immediately." My foot found the accelerator, an instinctive lunge for escape. The engine snarled. Instantly, his hand clamped onto my forearm, fingers biting deep with startling power. "Resist the urge to be foolish," he hissed. And now the knife was free, its lethal geometry undeniable in the dim cabin light. Pull over. Panic flared, a blinding white light in my skull. No help here, only endless dark and this predator beside me. Stopping meant yielding, crashing meant oblivion for both. The only path lay forward, paved with desperate hope. All right, I stammered, voice thin, trying to weave a thread of time. Just let me find somewhere level." His grip became excruciating, nails piercing flesh. "You have 60 seconds, Elias," he breathed, the calm in his voice more chilling than any shout. Then the blade does its work, moving or not. The needle climbed, 90, 100, 110 kilometers per hour. The chassis vibrated, protesting the strain. 30, Silas counted down, serene as a priest delivering last rites. Then salvation's faint spark, distant pinpricks of light, maybe a service station, an outpost of humanity. Adrenaline surged, a raw electric courage. "Look," I urged, nodding towards the nascent glow. "See? Just up ahead. No tricks." He leaned fractionally, squinting into the night. It was the sliver of opportunity I needed. I stomped the brake pedal with every ounce of force I possessed. Tires howled in protest as the car bucked and slewed sideways. Silas catapulted forward, his head cracking against the dash. Before the recoil settled, I wrenched the wheel violently to the right. Reality fractured, a kaleidoscope of spinning darkness, the shriek of tortured metal on asphalt yielding to the frantic clawing of tires on earth. A sickening lurch, a moment suspended, then the brutal, crunching violence of impact. Tumbling, rolling, metal screaming, glass exploding, until motion ceased with a final jarring thud, the world settling onto its side. Silence, but for the high-pitched whine in my skull and the death rattle of the engine, then the percussion of cooling metal, the slow drip 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 of vital fluids bleeding onto the earth. Beside me, a low, guttural moan. Blood trickled into my eye. I blinked it clear. Silas lay canted against the door, inert, the knife resting obscenely on the fractured landscape of the windshield. Tremors racked my hands as I fumbled with the seatbelt clasp. A sharp agony flared in my side. Out. Get out. The driver's door pinned beneath us. Escape lay over my captor. My body screamed objection with every strained movement as I crawled across the console, pushing against Silas's dead weight, bile rising in my throat. The passenger door groaned open under my desperate shove, spilling me onto blessed, solid ground. The night air, cool and damp against my torn skin, felt like absolution. On unsteady legs, I rose, casting a single glance back at the mangled ruin of the car. Tendrils of smoke curled from the crumpled hood. The sharp tang of petrol stung my nostrils. Move, fast. I lurched towards the distant lights, first stumbling, then breaking into a ragged jog. Pain lanced through me with every footfall, but the greater agony was the terror of looking back, of seeing him rise from the wreckage. The lights resolved into the fluorescent glare of a tiny fuel station. A figure emerged from the doorway, freezing, his face a mask of shock at my bloodied, disheveled state. Help, the word tore from my raw throat. Police, call them. He hurried me inside, the click of the lock echoing in the sudden quiet as he reached for the phone. My legs gave way, and I collapsed onto the cool linoleum, the wave of spent adrenaline leaving me utterly adrift. The ensuing minutes dissolved into a blur of strobing lights, the keening cry of sirens, disembodied voices asking questions I couldn't process. Later, cocooned in the sterile womb of an ambulance, oxygen whispering against my face, the reality began to seep in. I had survived. The authorities found Silas, concussed and broken-boned but breathing, amidst the twisted metal. He was, they later told me, a predator long sought across state lines, a phantom tied to brutality and bloodshed, the knife from my car his signature on unsolved atrocities. Lying in the antiseptic quiet of a hospital room, every bruise and fracture singing its own painful tune, the what-ifs circled like vultures. That single act of misguided empathy, a moment's weakness, had brought me to the precipice. Lucky, the physician had murmured. Lucky the crash hadn't claimed me. But beneath the lingering shock, a different understanding took root. It wasn't fortune. It was something harder, more primal, the sheer, unyielding refusal to be extinguished. I had stared into the abyss on that desolate stretch of highway and clawed my way back. Scarred, yes. Haunted, undoubtedly, but undeniably present, breathing, and breath in that moment was a victory enough. The mending would take time, stitching together not just flesh and bone, but the frayed edges of trust, the sense of safety shattered on that dark road. The highway, once a symbol of escape, now felt like a place where shadows lingered too long. Yet as the murmurs of the ward faded and oblivion beckoned, a quiet vow formed within the stillness. I would mend, I would reclaim the road. But the door to strangers, glimpsed in the lonely dark, that door would remain forever closed. They suggest ink on paper might anchor me, a tether to the here and now, when the then and there still whispers. So I write, tracing the contours of that night, hoping to map the edges of the impossible. Returning from the heartland, the long drive east towards Cleveland stretched before me under a bruised twilight sky. Interstate 90 hummed its monotonous rhythm. 6 hours more, the satellite navigation promised. Then, near midnight, the abrupt blaze of construction lights, the flickering wand of a highway patrolman directing us onto an unfamiliar county route. A detour. I obeyed without question, merging onto the exit ramp, expecting a caravan of taillights. Instead, the darkness swallowed me whole. When had the others vanished? A 2-lane ribbon of asphalt sliced through fields of skeletal corn, brittle and bleached under the late October moon. My headlamps carved a tunnel through the oppressive blackness. Nothing moved but the dust motes dancing in the beams. 11:42 p.m. The dashboard clock glowed accusingly. An hour dissolved into the hypnotic monotony of the straight road. No other cars bled light into my mirrors. No farmhouses punctuated the void. Only static hissed from the radio, a dead language. My phone displayed a stark no service. The fuel needle hovered reassuringly above the halfway mark, ample range to regain the interstate, wherever it now hid. The first pass hardly registered, and derelict service station swallowed by weeds, pumps like rusted sentinels, windows gaping sockets, a faded Apex Petroleum sign hanging askew. What snagged my attention, a fleeting oddity, was the adjacent mile marker 113, an insignificant number, yet it stuck. 20 minutes crawled by. Then, impossibly, the service station reappeared. The same skeletal pumps, the identical shattered panes, the same crooked Apex sign, and beside it, stark white, mile marker 113. Impossible, I breathed, the sound alien in the car's sealed silence. The clock read 12:47 a.m. Onward I drove, the road refusing any deviation, a perfect, unwavering line flanked by whispering corn. Darkness consumed the rearview mirror. Darkness awaited ahead. At 1:23 a.m., the apparition returned, the Apex station, mile marker 113. The sign seemed to sigh in the wind this time. My knuckles whitened on the wheel. This wasn't fatigue, no micro-sleep fugue. The car had held its course. Reality had buckled. My foot pressed down. 70 became 80 Moebius. The cornfields smeared into brown streaks. I counted the seconds as eyes fixed on the relentless road. Precisely 17 minutes later, like a clockwork, the station materialized from the gloom, mile marker 113. No, the cry tore from my throat as I slammed the brakes, the tires screaming, the car slewing to a halt mid-lane. The engine pulsed, a frantic heartbeat in the sudden stillness. Wind rustled the dead stalks, a dry, sibilant chorus. I fumbled for my phone, praying for a signal, for the reassuring logic of a map. Nothing. A U-turn, gravel crunching under the tires. Retreat. That was the only sane option. 20 minutes against the grain of my previous travel, and there it stood, caught in my headlights, like a stage set. Mile marker 113. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through me. Sweat slicked my back despite the autumn chill. Roads didn't behave this way. There had to be junctions missed, obscured by the night. I snatched a notepad from the glove compartment, pen clicking. Document everything. Time, landmarks, anything. 2:15 a.m. Past station, tallied utility poles, roughly one every 100 feet. 2:32 a.m. Station, times, pull count consistent. 2:49 a.m., station. Apex sign still groaning its metallic complaint. 3:06 a.m., station. A detail surfaced, a shattered soda machine beside the boarded door. 3:23 a.m., station. The same broken machine glinting dimly. The fuel gauge dipped ominously towards a quarter tank. Perhaps 3 hours left. My throat felt like sandpaper. Think. I steered onto the gravel shoulder, cutting the engine. Silence slammed down, amplifying the wind's insistent murmuring through the corn. Then a flicker in the side mirror, a shape deeper than the surrounding night. My head snapped around. The rear window framed only empty road and rustling stalks. Tap, tap, tap. I jolted, heart hammering. A face materialized at my driver's side window. An old man, his eyes sunk deep in a weathered face, bristling with gray stubble, clad in a heavy plaid jacket. His breath misted the glass. My finger trembled on the window switch, lowering it a crack. "Shouldn't be out here," he rasped, his voice coarse, unused. "Lost," I managed, trying to find I-90 again. "This detour." He shook his head slowly, definitively. "Ain't no detour tonight. Highway's clear. But the construction, the patrolmen. Haven't seen highway patrol on this stretch in 20 years, he stated flatly, leaning closer. The scent of damp earth and something else, something indefinably old, drifted in. "You gotta leave, right now." "I'm trying. This road, it just loops. I keep seeing that gas station. That Apex place, burned to the foundations back in '83. Nothing there now but cinders and weeds. A chill deeper than the night air seeped into my bones. I stared past him at the structure clearly illuminated by my headlights, the broken windows, the crooked sign. When I turned back, the space beside my car was empty. The engine roared to life. I jammed the gear shift, flooring the accelerator. Gravel sprayed as the tires fought for purchase. Direction ceased to matter, only flight. Again the station emerged from the darkness. Again the sign creaked. Again, mile marker 113 gleamed. The fuel gauge plunged, the needle hitting E. The engine sputtered, choked, and died. I coasted onto the shoulder, the silence returning, absolute and terrifying. Wind rattled the corn. Shadows writhed between the stalks. Tap, tap, tap. I didn't turn. I knew who stood there. Last opportunity, the old man's voice muffled by the glass. Time to go. How? The word fractured. The road won't let me. It ain't the road that's circling. He gestured, a weathered finger pointing towards my chest. It's you. I don't understand. Think, he urged. Go back. How did you really get onto this road? I squeezed my eyes shut. The construction lights, the detour sign, the patrolman waving me off. No. Headlights, blindingly bright, swerving across the center line. the monstrous grille of a semi-truck filling my world, the tortured scream of tires, the horrifying rush of the crash barrier. My eyes snapped open. The old man watched, his gaze knowing. An accident, I whispered. He nodded grimly. Nasty one. Found your car crumpled against the median. You've been unconscious 3 weeks now. Am I dead? Not yet, but drifting close. This place. He swept a hand towards the whispering fields. It catches folks, ones who ain't ready to cross over. Drive this loop long enough, you forget there was ever another road, just become another whisper in the corn. And I saw them then, faint, translucent shapes drifting between the rows, pacing the same futile circuits I had driven, lost souls. How do I leave? Same way you arrived. He pointed back down the road I'd traveled, the direction I'd come from before the U-turn. But this time, don't shy away from the light. I turned the key. Against all odds, the engine caught, humming smoothly, defying the empty tank. Thank you, I murmured. The old man stepped away from the car. Safe journey, son. Try not to come back this way. I drove. One final time, the apex station loomed, mile marker 113. The sign seemed to dip in farewell. Then ahead, a brilliant, searing light flooded the windshield. Every instinct screamed to swerve, to avoid the impact. This time, I held the wheel steady. Consciousness returned to the smell of antiseptic and the rhythmic beep of machines. A hospital room. The doctors spoke of miracles, of improbable survival. My tale of the looping road, the phantom station, the old man, they smiled politely, attributing it to the injured brain's phantasmagoria. Coma dreams. But I know, sometimes, in the dead quiet of night, I hear the corn rustling even miles from any field. Shadows in my peripheral vision seem to coalesce and drift. Mile marker 113 is burned into my memory, a symbol of the road that circles back on itself. I avoid detours now, sticking religiously to the main highways. Lucky, they call me, perhaps. But I find myself wondering about him, the old man eternally walking that desolate stretch, wondering about the others, trapped in their endless loops between the stalks, wondering if, in that twilight place between worlds, an apex sign still creaks in the wind, marking time for the next lost traveler. I try not to dwell. Some roads are best left untraveled. Some truths remain shrouded. Mostly, I'm grateful I found my way back. Mostly. But sometimes, driving alone late at night when the radio dissolves into static, my eyes dart to the mirrors, searching for impossible repetitions, ensuring the landmarks change, ensuring I'm still moving forward, just checking I'm truly home.